Hello, welcome. Today I am joined by physiotherapist Charlie Goodchild. Charlie, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the chat today.
Likewise. So yes, you had some very good feedback from your talk at Therapy Expo a couple of weeks ago. So don't feel any pressure, but I'm looking forward to seeing what all the fuss is about.
Well, I'm surprised given that I lost my voice on the morning of, and I basically growled my way through it with some kind of croaky voice and a mouthful of Lemsips. So yeah, I don't know how, but just about got away with it, I think.
So how was that for you, Therapy Expo?
So first time I've been, I haven't been as a delegate actually. So I was asked by Mike James, the endurance physio, because he was on my podcast actually. So he kind of got in touch and said, I think it'd be good for you to come on. I'm curating this room. Do you want to do it? And it's actually the first one I've done. I've never spoken at a conference before, so didn't really know what I was going to speak about actually. He asked me if I wanted to come on, and I didn't really have a topic necessarily. I wouldn't say I'm specialist in any particular area of physio. I've got a few different areas of interest, so it took me a little while actually to figure out what I wanted to talk on. But yeah, once I got my head around that, and got my head around the fact that it was going to be pretty, I'm actually deliberately taking myself out of my comfort zone in the last couple of years, because I used to get quite nervous about things and used to be quite, I guess my natural is to be an introvert. So to put myself out there and put my ideas out there is not my comfort zone. But once I've done it, I get quite a buzz out of that. I quite like it. So when the invite came through, it was another one of those invites that I thought, I don't automatically want to do this, and therefore I should do it. It was that feeling, and because I know all this, when you're outside your comfort zone and you challenge your fears, you do learn a lot and you get a lot out of it, and then the next time you do it, it feels easier, and as a result of that, I feel much more like I want to put myself in those positions nowadays, which I wouldn't have done earlier in my career.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and it's definitely, I agree with that mindset of pushing yourself, not so much so that you're like in a stressing or doing that, but it's good to put some pressure on to make sure that you're achieving it. Bearing in mind you didn't have a topic, why do you think Mike asked you to speak then?
I suppose because he came onto my podcast, and perhaps and I think he has listened to a few of the episodes. Perhaps he just thought I spoke well enough to get away with a conference talk. So I guess that's probably where it comes from. We've got quite similar ideas as well. So I guess if he's curating a room, he's got a message he wants to portray, and he probably thought that I'd be a good speaker for that kind of topic, or that kind of the feel that he wanted to convey with his room. So yeah, I enjoyed it though. I had a lot of fun. Despite the losing my voice, and I think I was more nervous about whether I had a voice or not rather than the talk itself. So once I realized I could just about talk, the rest of it didn't really feel that bad. I just got going and quite enjoyed it in the end.
Yeah, great. No, well done for doing it anyway. So yeah, getting back to you then. So talk to me about where you're from originally and how you got involved in or the desire to get into this area.
I'll give you a longish version, I suppose. So I grew up in Gidea Park, near Romford in Essex. Went to primary school there, then went to secondary school in Upminster. So a kind of Essex, Greater London upbringing, depending on who you speak to. And while I was at school, I guess I found kind of exams and stuff relatively easy, but didn't really try that hard and wasn't that interested in trying that hard for anything. My main interest was sport. I just loved playing sport. So but I quite quickly realised I wasn't good enough to play. So once I realised I wasn't good enough to play a sport professionally, it was then trying to figure out how could I be in sport without being good enough to play it. So probably in my mid-teens, I suppose, just as we're getting into GCSEs, I started to think about being a physio and seeing people like Gary Lewin go on. I'm an Arsenal fan, so seeing people like Gary Lewin go on and think, oh, maybe I could do a bit of that and be involved in a sports team. And I quite liked the idea of understanding the human body as well. That appealed to me. But I was put off that when I was at college. Actually, there was once I got to college, I was doing the right A levels to go into physio. I was doing PE, biology, psychology, and all these things help. I think I did maths as well. and there was a few people that said, oh, it's quite hard to get onto physio courses, you know, have you considered other things? And I don't know, because I didn't have much confidence, I probably let that get into my head a bit and decided, well, okay, well, physio's too hard, I'll go into sports science. So I did a sports science degree at Essex Uni, which was fine. I actually really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the degree. I learned a lot. It was the stage in my life where I figured out how to learn, I think, and apply myself. With all of a sudden, it was like, well, no one's going to push me. And although I did okay in my A levels, I didn't excel at that. I did well in my GCSEs, tried to coast through my A levels and realised I couldn't. You actually had to try in those, and probably enjoyed the social side of college a bit too much. And then it was, I guess, the realisation that I'd had, you know, average to good A levels, and then wanting to not be disappointed in myself again in my degree. I don't know, I figured out that I probably should try, and it was a bit of a turning point for me, that transition from college to uni. And from that point onwards, I think I've enjoyed learning ever since. I've enjoyed the process of actually applying myself and trying. You know, my parents never put that much pressure on me in school, and in some ways, I guess that's allowed me to figure out what I want to do rather than feeling the pressure of them. It just happened a bit later than I think it happens for other people, happening at uni rather than at college or at school even. So then I guess I'm getting into my degree, doing quite well, and enjoyed the whole process, enjoyed university life, the whole thing. It was really good experience for me. And then I still get to like third year uni, and I'm like, what do I want to do? Like, is there enough in sports science for me? I didn't think there was quite enough opportunities in the world of sports science. I didn't really want to be a PE teacher, and there's an incredible amount of sports science students who end up going on to do completely unrelated jobs, and I thought that kind of intimidated me a bit. I didn't really know what I wanted to do outside of sports science or outside of sport. And then the idea of physio came back, so then it was a slightly different opportunity to do a post-grad MSc. So you do a 2-year MSc, which is like the accelerated version of a degree course. So I went straight into that, applied for that, got in, and went straight into that. So that was also at Essex Uni. So I spent 5 years there studying, and that kind of leads to being so although you do a master's, you're not any further ahead than any other BSc physio student. You've just academically got a master's rather than kind of the practical skills are the same. So yeah, 5 years, and then I finally decided I was going to commit to a career of physio.
Right. And so was there any doubt in terms of what you were going to do at that point? Because I completely agree. It was the same for me. It's like you either go and work in a gym, it seemed, or you do a PE teaching. You go and do PGCE, and I think there is a lack there, isn't there, of, well, what do you do after a sports science degree?
Yeah, it's so big. So there's such big courses. So there's so many people on them. You know, one of my best friends is now a very successful window salesman who was on my sports science course. You know, it's mad. And he knew straight away when he finished the course. He had no interest at all in doing anything related to sports science. In fact, sport or science, let alone sports science as a profession. So it just goes to show, you know, a big chunk of those people did go on to be PE teachers as well. There's, I think, 5 or 6 of us ended up on the physio course. I think a few at Essex, a few somewhere else. So yeah, there's definitely a trend. There's lots of interest in the topic and just not enough opportunities in the world of sports science.
Yeah, well, I suppose in a way it's like there's loads of degrees, whether it's English, even maths. They don't necessarily, they're not vocational, are they? They're just a level of learning. So I guess at least sports science is a pathway to something in potentially in health sciences. I guess, did that give you a good grounding? Did you feel like you were not further ahead, but with the other people? I suppose they're all on it was all a master's course, so they were all at a similar level, were they?
So there's a fairly common trend of, there's a lot of sports scientists on those courses. There are also sports therapists who have gone through probably a slightly more appropriate or kind of closely related course to get into physio. There's also some people that have done, you know, I think there was someone who had done biological sciences and maybe some even more far-fetched courses, but just changed their mind and wanted to do that. So there's a bit of a mix in regard to, like, did it prepare me? I'd say it did prepare me for, in some ways, I would say that I understood the human body physiologically better than some of the other courses, perhaps. But academically, I was nowhere near prepared. I thought I tried hard on my degree, and I mentioned about kind of learning how to learn, that kind of process. You get onto a master's course, and it's just so much more challenging. It pushes you yet again to really have to commit to the workload. So that was hard, actually. Yeah, my first year, I thought I could coast it after doing pretty well my degree. I thought I could coast it, and had a bit of a shock to the system. I failed one of my vivas by basically only preparing for 2 out of 3 of the topics, and the one I didn't prepare for came up. So you kind of learn through your mistakes, right? And that was definitely one of them. And I would say, actually, I've probably used sports science more since qualifying than I did on the course. Going back to your original question as I go off on a tangent, but I'd say I probably apply it more now through working in sport sometimes, or even just in conversations with patients. I use it more now than I did on the course.
Yeah, we were mentioning Andrew McCauley before, who was also at Therapy Expo, because I know he was similar background, isn't he, in terms of doing sports science first. And I think that is, in a way, maybe it does give you an extra niche if he does his S&C course, which is really popular, and you can see there's a big gap in that in physio, it seems.
Big time. Yeah, you don't get taught that on the physio course. You have I think from memory, we had probably 3 hours worth of exercise education, exercise teaching within our 2-year master's course, which is nuts, given that exercise prescription is probably at least 50% of what I do as a physio, maybe more. So it's crazy that it is. I know there are other branches of physio, respiratory, neuro, but even they have an element of rehabilitation of exercise that they need to understand. So to me, it seems nuts that we don't get taught more. Really crazy. It's a special interest of mine. So it's not as hard for me to learn about it because I want to. But there's a lot of physios out there that are underskilled in exercise prescription. Hence why Andrew does so well. Because people need to understand it. Yeah, and they realise that they don't have the knowledge. So they seek out education from people like him.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's really good seeing it evolve and progress into those areas. So when you were on the course, then was it full time as a master's?
Full time, and it was really full time as well. It's probably one of the most intense courses you can be on, because there is just so much to cover. You got 4 or 5 weeks off in the summer, and the rest of it, you get a couple of weeks off here and there, Christmas, Easter, but yeah, the rest of it is just teaching and or being on placement. It's really full on.
Yeah. Which placements did you have?
I had 2 or 3 musculoskeletal outpatient placements, which were always my favourites. So they were always the areas that I wanted to. I was pretty sure when I finished my degree, my master's, even probably at the start, to be honest, that was where I was going to go, into musculoskeletal care. But I did a respiratory one as my first one. That was thrust into the deep end. My first day being just walking into intensive care unit and being told to go and assess a patient. It's just, I remember just thinking, what the hell am I going to do here? I'm well out of my depth. And a couple of weeks in, my educator went off sick, and I was pretty much running the respiratory ward 2 weeks into my practical learning as a physio. I mean, that's sink or swim time, right? it was mad. And I think one of the other educators, couple of days in, kind of came in and said, "Oh, how are you getting on? You all right? I know that Sue's off and you're doing okay." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I don't know. Am I?" Like, literally no idea. Like, am I keeping these people alive or not? I mean, it just shows, the level of trust that some students are given. Not necessarily in a good way, but the NHS is grossly understaffed and these things happen. So, but I did a community placement as well, neurological community placement. Didn't really enjoy that. Didn't really do a lot in that one. A lot of driving around people and not really doing much. And I like to problem solve. I like to think and try and figure things out. Didn't feel we did a lot of that in that one. Even orthopedics, to some extent, as much as I quite liked it while I was there, I couldn't see myself doing it for that long, because you're very process driven. You just get told what to do. In this situation, you do this. In this situation, you do that. So you're just following process. by the end of it, I kind of figured out what I needed to do in 5 weeks. And to me, that's not a career for me. I want to be always learning, forever challenging myself. Orthopedics didn't seem like the place I could do that.
Well, it sounds like the placement served their purpose for you.
Absolutely.
In terms of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And credit to the structure of that to allow you to get the chance of doing different things and figure out what works best for you.
And what were the MSK ones that you had?
I was in, maybe it was 2. Yeah, I was in Basildon for 1, and I was in Epping for 1. Actually, both were good, actually. Yeah, good learning experiences. I had good educators who gave me the time of day and supported me through that. So yeah, and you start to think, oh, maybe I know what I'm doing here, and then you get out into the big wide world and you realize you know absolutely fuck all. It's mad. You kind of, what's it called? I think it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. You think you know quite a lot, and then there's this moment when you realize you actually know nothing, and then you got this realization of it's actually a fairly slow and steady journey towards being an expert in the field. So, yeah, I definitely had that realization pretty quick in my job, my first job.
Well, I think it's the people who don't realise that they don't know anything. That's where the problem comes in.
They're the dangerous ones. Yeah. Yeah.
So after you'd done all these placements, then did you have a clear idea then what were you going to do at the end of that masters?
Well, I thought I did, and then I couldn't get a job. So I thought I would go into NHS rotations, which is the standard route, and then there were just no jobs. NHS was a weird time back then. There were loads of band 6 and 7 jobs about, and there were all the band 5s. And then for some reason there was just no band 5s, or it was something like that. I can't remember the exact details, but basically there were no band 5 jobs. So there was 4 or 5 jobs coming up every week, and there was thousands of people applying for them, or at least hundreds. It certainly didn't feel like you had any chance. You just put it in, rejection. I heard rumours of it being like half would just get deleted without even checking it, because there were just so many to review, so they just wouldn't even look at half of the application, sometimes just on the letter of your surname. So I was pretty skint by that time. 5 years at uni, not needing to, parents weren't really able to support any of that, so I didn't have any money. I was in loads of debt, so I started off as a labourer for a bricklayer that I knew. So I did 7 months I think it was, as a bricklayer's labourer, just to try and earn a bit of cash. Couldn't get a physio job. So then around February time, this was February 2011, there were 2 opportunities that came up. So the first one was a bank role in Chelsea and Westminster, which is the other side of London for me. It would have been about an hour and a bit commute to get to. And also because it was a bank role, it wasn't guaranteed work either. Or a job with IPRS came up, which I know you worked at IPRS as well, and it wasn't necessarily the recommended route to go straight into. So this was a musculoskeletal opportunity to go straight into musculoskeletal. You're supposed to kind of learn your kind of earn your stripes by learning different things on rotations, but once 7 months into working on a building site, you kind of take anything. And this job was in Dagenham, so it was like a 20-minute journey from my house, maybe even a bit less than that. And actually, so I took that one in the end. Started in March, and immediately kind of loved it. It was based in a factory, working in an occupational health unit inside the factory, and it was a bit weird and a bit strange and grimy and a bit smelly. Wow, did I learn, like just people coming in with all sorts of strange problems, and you start figuring out the psychology that goes into this profession, or even just the psychology of people, perhaps just in general. All these people who are unhappy with work or got really difficult lives outside of work, and you're getting used because they just can't be bothered to work, so they're coming in for physio instead. And then there's the politics of the unions, and you're sitting in the middle sometimes of the union, the patient, and like they're asking you whether this person could work or not. You're having to make decisions on different jobs. So yeah, that was really thrust into totally different world, but an enjoyable one. And it wasn't long after that I had that realization that I really knew nothing, because you're getting all these challenging situations and figuring out that you just don't know the answers to them. It was around probably about my coming halfway through my first, maybe even towards my second year of being there, that I realized how good an opportunity it is for other students to learn. So I actually got back in touch with my university and said that I'd take on students to do placements there. And I ended up having maybe 9 or 10 students come down to do their placement because of the difference in practice and just an environment I'd never experienced. So yeah, it was great, really great opportunity for lots of different reasons. But yeah, very strange as well in some ways.
Yeah, well, that must be interesting, because having been to several of these plants, like the Ford one, I'm based in the northwest, so I've been to Goodchild, and the setup, it is a strange setup in there. And also, like, how big were there many other people from IPRS there, or was it you in a room? Because that's I know a lot of time with Carla, who was up in the northwest. That's what it was that well, I think she's still there actually. So it's like that from a learning perspective, you're learning from the patients, but how does it feel from a shadowing perspective?
It should have been a bit better than it was, and I don't want to be too critical of the environment and the situation, because I still learned a hell of a lot and got so much from it. But the people I was with, I probably didn't learn as much as I perhaps should have been. They just weren't the personality type to be forthcoming with education. I had a good manager, but he was quite often out of off-site doing other things, so I didn't really see him a lot either. So that it could have been a lot better, and that was one of the reasons why when I then took on the management role, I tried to be a bit more supportive in that sense. But again, by that point I was only 2 years qualified, so I didn't necessarily have all the answers myself. So I wasn't on my own, but I also wasn't necessarily learning quite as much as I would have perhaps liked or benefited from. I guess I was fairly self-motivated though, so I was always seeking out opportunities to learn new skills somewhere else, and started doing ergonomic assessments either in the plant or outside of they had a lot of contracts with banks, for example, and you go out and do desk assessments for people and other offices. So I was learning a lot, but not necessarily through being taught, but just by experiencing lots of different things.
Yeah, and then you mentioned the management position. How did that come about?
My manager then had a promotion. He was a regional manager, I think, and they needed a site manager. So 2 years in, I applied for it, not really thinking I'd get it, but they must have recognised something and gave me a chance. So I ended up managing the site, which was awesome. Being in a management leadership role 2 years in is great. Perhaps felt a little bit kind of underprepared for it, but enjoyed it. And I got promoted again at one point and ended up sort of regional manager, and I guess I was sort of 3, maybe 4 years into my job at IPRS, ended up doing 1, sometimes 2 days of clinical work and 3 to 4 days of management / client related contacts, and just thought, hang on a minute, is this what I want to do? I had a bit of a moment where I thought, do I want to go into this? And because I could see the trend of being less clinical, more management, sort of almost being not forced towards it. I was choosing the opportunities, but the work becoming more and more about that, and then realizing that actually I did want to be a physio. I did want to learn about being a physio before I then started to look out for some other opportunities. I realized that within IPRS there wasn't, for me to keep progressing through my career, I couldn't really be a clinician there. That was the process really. You go into these sort of non-clinical roles. That wasn't really what I wanted. So as great as it was, as amazing as it was to feel so supported and so empowered at a really early stage in my career, it wasn't quite right for what I was looking for. So kind of begrudgingly, I had to look elsewhere. And I then went into a part-time sports role, but it was quite busy, and for Saracens Academy. So I spent a year at Saracens Academy, because that was at that point I thought maybe I'll go into sport and try and do that. I was already doing some work with the FA by this point, so I was doing some work with the FA. I then had this 4-day, 3.5 to 4 day a week sports role. I was still doing a day a week, I think maybe 2 days a week for IPRS, and I'd just taken on another role for Barking Rugby Club. So I had like 5 jobs at this stage, which with, I guess, a year goes by of that and you realize it's not really sustainable either, because sport's just so poorly paid. I needed these other jobs to keep me ticking over. A year into that sports role with Saracens, and I guess I'd started to realize that maybe sport wasn't what I thought it was, and it's quite lonely actually as a physio. At that point I started to feel like I didn't really feel that supported by some of the other physios there. Just so I was kind of based off site of their main training facility at the local college. So I was with coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, so I was learning from them, but as a physio I probably didn't have that much input, and I lived quite far away from there. It was another big long commute, and I applied for a job to get into the academy full-time rather than being part-time, and I didn't get it. And that was the moment where I kind of thought, I can't do another year in this college. I can't do it. It was pretty crushing actually. Like I'd pinned my hopes on working my way through Saracens. I really thought that's what I would do. To not get that job.
Do you know why you didn't get it?
I think I messed up a couple of the interview questions, and if, like, in hindsight, they weren't clinical questions necessarily. They were more like political questions about how would you manage this situation within the squad, and I didn't do that well in them. I think I stumbled on a couple of them, didn't give them the answers they wanted, and I remember a really difficult conversation with the other physios, the other Saracens physios, about them giving me this feedback and just feeling like man, I've messed up, and like, what am I going to do? I don't think I want to be here for another year. I don't think I want to wait until the next opportunity comes through. Yeah, that was probably the hardest part of my career, not for the first time getting rejected by someone. That was really tough.
So that must be, it's strange, I guess. So I'm trying to think if I've ever had that experience where you're being interviewed by the people that you work with day in, day out. Is that what it was here? Pretty
much, yeah. Although I didn't really see them that often, I knew them well enough. So, and I think I probably went in a bit too confident, perhaps, thinking they know me. They know that I want this job. I probably went in thinking that I would get it, and although I prepared, I clearly hadn't prepared as much as I should have prepared, because I still messed up a bit. So yeah, that was hard actually, and having to have some pretty honest thoughts and conversations with the people around me about what I wanted to do, because it felt a bit like a failure then, because I'd had to take a pay cut to take this role, and then to give up on it within a year was quite embarrassing. It was quite embarrassing to do that. But I guess there was also this other nagging feeling of are you really enjoying this? Are you really enjoying seeing the same type of person, the same type of injury, day in, day out? You do a lot of standing around in sports physio as well. You do a lot of not being a physio, traveling, standing, watching training, joining in gym sessions rather than actually doing your job, being a physio. So I cut my losses, I guess, and started looking for a full-time physio job, clinical job. And so that's when I moved to Nuffield Health, went to work in Canary Wharf for Nuffield Health, and just, it was exactly what I needed. Just saw patients, fairly busy, and learned how to be a really good physio. I think one of the things, I was 4 years into my physio career, and I'd never really had anyone challenging me or anyone, maybe it was 5 years in actually, or teaching me how to be a physio. And I don't think I was as good as I thought I was at that point. And I just needed to see more patients, really. It was 2 years of being a manager at IPRS, 1 year of seeing 16-year-old college kids, 17-year-old college kids. I just needed to see more types of injuries and learn. So that 2.5 years at Nuffield Health was invaluable. Absolutely, what I needed was just to see more patients. The 10,000 hour rule of like becoming an expert. I was way off. I was way off. I just hadn't had enough hours of deliberate practice where I'm really trying to get better at being a physio. So yeah, that was perfect for me.
So yeah, it sounds like you'd gone through some real niche areas of occupational health, some adolescent stuff, and you weren't doing that general MSK outpatient type environment.
Yeah, occupational health was MSK, but it had a twist. It wasn't, and also it wasn't always that busy. You wouldn't see that many people. So yeah, there wasn't always the you're doing a lot of like functional assessments as well, and ergonomic assessments, and not just MSK. And without really realizing it, I wasn't learning about the thing that I really wanted to learn about. What I was learning was about psychology, and that's really been impactful later in my career now, and that's been really helpful. But yeah, I just needed that time of seeing different injuries.
So how big was the team at Nuffield there?
My first Nuffield job was in an occupational, not quite occupational. It was like based in a bank. So but it was still very standard musculoskeletal. You're not doing any ergonomic stuff. That was a year, and then I did a year in the medical centre and all of them had kind of teams of around 4 or 5. So although there was people around me, I wouldn't say that it was the best learning environment. It was okay. It was, you do some formalized CPD, but everyone's really busy, so you don't always get the time to just chat to people, and perhaps it didn't also feel like that kind of environment either. People didn't seem that forthcoming with clinical discussions and advice. Yeah, it was okay, but I was still probably looking for a bit more. 2.5 years in, again, I started to get that feeling of, well, I've stopped learning. And that's when I look back now, when I've moved, it's mostly been around not learning. Even that Saracens experience, although it was certainly triggered by not getting that job, it was also the realization I'd stopped learning. I'd probably learned everything I needed to learn from that particular role, and I needed to then learn again. So that Nuffield happened again. It's like, all right, I've stopped learning. I need to find something else. Yeah.
So what was next?
Pure sports medicine, actually. So a friend of mine, Andy Goodall, was already a physio there, close friend of mine. And I think I was just walking around a shopping centre with him one day. I can't remember why we were there. It's very unusual for us to be wandering around a shopping centre. We were wandering around the shopping centre, probably doing a bit of Christmas shopping, perhaps. And I'd said, I was getting a little bit stale at Nuffield Health. I'd stopped learning. And he was like, why don't you just apply for Pure? You do really well there. And I kind of went, yeah, why wouldn't I? Like, I already knew I would have liked to have had a job there, because I did an acupuncture course there maybe in like 2012 and loved the facility. It was a really great facility, and always thought at one point in my career I'd work there. And I thought, yeah, why not? It just seemed so obvious. So I applied and got the job there. And I'm still there now, actually, although kind of leaving fully in Feb next year. But yeah, it was a bit of a no-brainer at that time to go to Pure and push on my learning again. And it did exactly that. It is the first place I've been to where I really felt like there was a natural learning environment, like a real organic learning off other people. Everyone's chatting, everyone's curious. It was the first place I've been where there was that.
Because it looks like it's a really integrated place to work, where you've got the consultants, and then you've got the really diverse and varied clinical team in terms of therapy. Is that what it's like?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, it's a true MDT. Yeah, multidisciplinary team of sports doctors. You've got physios, osteopaths, strength and conditioning coaches, podiatrists, Pilates instructors, nutritionists, soft tissue therapists. I've probably missed a couple, but it's really got a good diverse mix of professions and also people, which is good. So that was the first time. I think I probably learned more in my 3 years there, 3 months there, my first 3 months there, than probably in the previous year, maybe even a bit longer at Nuffield. So, and that's not anything against Nuffield. It's just that the environment's different, and it really suited me. That pure sports medicine environment really suited me.
What particularly about that environment then, in terms of is it a fast-paced one? What is it that you thought was better there?
Not really. I'd say I was really busy at Nuffield Health, but it's the corridor conversations. It's the chatting in the staff room. People aren't just chatting about their life, they're chatting about clinical stuff. That was eye-opening for me. It was like no one had ever done that at previous jobs. No one. It was almost a bit like people were a little bit insecure about their own knowledge. So they didn't want to talk about clinical stuff. So you just ended up not having those chats. And I hadn't realized that that was happening until I went to a place where it did happen. And then it was like, oh, people chat about this like this. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know you could just openly chat about things you're finding difficult. That was a bit of a shock to me, in a good way. It's like, well, this is great. I'm learning straight away. I was learning every time I was shadowing other people, and it was that as well. It's like, right, go and shadow this person, go and shadow that person. Also, someone's going to sit in on your sessions. Is that okay? It's like, yeah, sure. I'd never really had it before, or maybe once in my career before I'd had someone sit in on a session. I mean, how nuts is that? By this point, I was 8 years into my career, and I'd had one person sit in on a session to peer review me. That's crazy. It was happening when I was a student, and then it just stopped. Like, mad. Like I didn't realize it until it was happening that I'd gone so long without that.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I definitely agree with you. And like, do you think there's a culture of there is insecurity, but maybe it is that really? Like when we're doing a meeting or in there, I can tell certain people, if people don't ask questions, it's like they don't ask questions. It's like you must, even if any question is a good one, but sometimes it feels like there's not that. Do you think that's something that is prevalent across the industry?
There's clearly places that do it well. Actually, I think the NHS is pretty good at it, and perhaps that's one of the biggest losses I had early in my career, not going into the NHS, is not having people watch me. Perhaps it's not across the board, but I do know people that have had pretty good support early in their career. Going back to Andy Goodall, I remember him saying pretty good things about his early stage at the NHS. He had some good education there, whereas I didn't necessarily have that. I learned other things, but I didn't have that clinical knowledge that was coming through. That came a bit later. So yeah, I think it probably is a problem in a lot of professions, especially when there's a lot of physios working on their own in kind of single room environments, and as a result, you're not going to have other physios around you. But that's a worry to me, especially if I ever come across a clinician that has only been doing lone practice for a long time. That's a bit of an alarm bell, and perhaps they've just, I don't know, not recognised that that's happened to them. But that's a lonely place, being on your own day in, day out, and it's hard to maintain that learning and that motivation to learn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even more so, like with COVID and all that, isn't it? It's like you can see that home working, you see loads of mental health issues seems to be developing more so. So when you're looking at roles, it's in general, do you assess it because obviously there's the financial in terms of what you're going to get paid, but do you have any other criteria that you will objectively assess on?
Initially, it was more about ambition, what I wanted to do, of where I wanted my career to go. But certainly with Pure, it was learning. It was like, is this a place that I can learn? They have a good CPD budget. I'd heard good things about learning. It's not always all bells and whistles, but certainly I've learned a lot at Pure, and that's how I got exactly what I wanted from going there. And I think I've given a fair bit back as well. So learning was a big factor in that, and ended up in a role a couple of years in as the kind of head of the rehab team, or the sort of head of the physio and osteopath team, which meant I could then give a bit back as well, and put some extra structures in to make sure the company is continuing to deliver on that on that side of things with learning. Like, that was essentially the role. It was about it was a development role for those teams, governance and development, but I'd say development was the main thing. So it was great to then be able to really think about how I learned and how to maximize that for the other physios and osteos there. So I spent a year and a half, 2 years doing that, which was great, and figuring out how to lead a team as well. You know, it's a fairly big team in the end. You're kind of covering 40 plus clinicians across 2 days of the week. So that's busy in itself, but working out how to optimize your time to give people what they need, always feeling like you're not quite got enough time to do that, but certainly helps you time manage and prioritize things. Yeah, it was good.
Do they help, not just at Pure, but across the board? You've got the clinical side of things, but in a couple of the jobs that you've mentioned, you've progressed quite quickly in there. But do you get support in terms of whether it's leadership, management? So you go on courses, or is it all organic?
I did when I was at IPRS, actually, we did a bit of work on leadership. I remember that quite fondly, and still there's bits of that I would still use. There are some opportunities coming through at Pure to help you develop leadership skills. Most of it, I would say, though, is on the job, figuring it out. I think I've always had the ability to do that as well. I quite like doing those kind of roles, although kind of a natural introvert, I still quite like to support other people and help other people. So when I'm in a role like that, it feels like I'm helping more people. So I like that feel, and I'm quite organised, so I feel like I can organise my time quite well for others and support the learning and figure out what works for me, and therefore try and help others in that sense.
Because you get a lot of things. I know you've not worked directly in the NHS, but people say they're good at their job. They do a good job there. They progress, and then they get, say, put in a management position, and it's a completely different job, and it's trying to get the balance right. What are there any views on how those things should be done? Should management be management? Should physios be physios, or clinicians be that?
Horses for courses, I would say. There's some people that are much better suited to being a manager or a leader, and in that environment, they should have the opportunity, the pathway to work towards that kind of role. You know, Mark Hull, for example, we both know from IPRS, he doesn't do any clinical work anymore, and he's very well suited to leading big teams. You know, that's his specialism. And then you get other clinicians who have got no interest at all. They just want to be a clinician, or maybe go into research. I just think what organisations should have is different pathways for different people. That's difficult, because you've then got to be really flexible and as a company, as an organisation, to be able to do that. But if you want to have people commit to you for long periods of time, you need to be able to offer those people what they need. Otherwise, they're going to look for other opportunities. If you've got someone who, for example, wants to be a physio but also wants to do something else, if the only roles but doesn't want to be a manager, if the only roles you have are clinical or leadership management, then what do you do then? You're then going to lose them. They're going to move on and find something where they can do something else plus being a clinician. So I'd say that it's tricky, but they should have some kind of organizational structure that allows some level of flexibility to suit the individual, or you lose them.
Yeah. No, it's a constant thing where you want to empower. You want people to be passionate about what you're doing and enjoy what they're doing, or else they're not going to do a good job. So yeah, no, I agree with that. And so what are you doing after Pure then? How is that? You're not working there full time now? No,
I've set my own business up. So I've now got a healthcare business called Better, which is I guess it's primarily physio at the moment, but I've got a strength and conditioning coach that's working with me. I've also got a pain and wellness therapist who's doing some work with me as well. And it's ultimately my why in life is better never ends. So I wanted, when I realized I wanted to do something a bit bolder, I suppose, and I wanted to take on something a bit bigger, I was trying to figure out what that would be, and I kept coming back to my own why of better never ends. So obviously the name Better comes from that, and I didn't want to pigeonhole myself as a physio either, because I've enjoyed leadership. I've enjoyed supporting a team. and not just physios. I like the idea of having a different group of people around me, or a different level of a different group of professionals around me to support patients coming in different ways and in different at different stages of their recovery. So that was where the idea spawned from, I guess. I've been running my own podcast alongside Andy Goodall for a couple of years, so we'd had a bit of practice of kind of setting up a brand and putting ideas together, and it was putting social media content out there. So I'd had a bit of practice on setting something up and figured out roughly how I would do that. So once I'd decided around this time last year, maybe January this year, that I was ready for change because I'd stopped learning again, then that was what kept coming through. I didn't realize I'd do this. I didn't realize I'd have my own practice. I don't think I had the confidence in my early career, and felt like I'd just end up working in a sports team or for a big organization. But yeah, as I've got a bit more experience, I've recognized that I think I can do it. I think I can offer something to other healthcare practitioners that are looking to better themselves as well. That's really important to me. It's not just for the patients, it's for people that might come and work for me, that they've got that attitude. So I ended up launching that in August, based out of an amazing facility in Soho called Until. So I work there at the moment 3 days a week, and then as of February next year, I'll be full time there, doing probably 3 clinical days and 2, I don't know, probably some kind of creative / management / admin day, and see how that goes. But yeah, things have gone well. I've really enjoyed it. I've ended up being a little bit busier than I thought I'd be at this stage. So I've now recognised that I'm a bit too busy to be both at Pure and run a business. So yeah, hence why I'm stepping away after 4.5 years.
Right. So how's the stress levels of doing your own business then? How have you taken to that?
There's stress, but I love it. I absolutely love it. It's busy, and I've recognised that work-life balance is not quite what it has to be going forwards. But there's the moment I realised what I wanted to do. So I probably had a few months earlier in the year trying to understand what it would be and figuring it out, having conversations with people that had done it or done different things. The moment I realised what it was that I was going to do, all of the tension lifted, all of the stress was different. I just felt like I didn't feel scared, I didn't feel anxious. I just felt like that was what I was going to do, and I just believed that even if it didn't work out, it didn't matter, because that was what I wanted to do. So it felt quite easy actually from that point onwards. I just ended up enjoying the late night working, because I was still full time at Pure at that time. Enjoyed staying up late doing weird stuff and researching and designing logos and all these things that I never thought I would like. I was absolutely loving it and really, really enjoying the challenge of that. So yeah, there is stress and it is busy, but not in a bad way.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And why do you think you lacked confidence then earlier in your career and until recently? It sounds like why do you reckon that is?
It's strange. I've always been confident in some things. I don't lack confidence inherently. I'm confident that I can do a reasonable job playing sport. I'm confident that I can apply myself and learn stuff on the whole. But perhaps the prospect of running a business just seemed really far off. It just seemed like it was something that I wouldn't be able to do. I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that. I don't really know the answer to why didn't I have confidence then. Probably just didn't feel like I knew enough. If I want to do something, I like to feel equipped to do it and capable to do it. Yeah, I probably just didn't feel like I knew enough.
Yeah, sounds like you never feel like you know enough anyway, and that's why you move on to the new things.
Yeah, better never ends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like you mentioned your why earlier on, is that like, do you use Simon Sinek stuff like to?
That's where it came from. Yeah. So I read that book in lockdown, and I was trying to understand what is my why then. And then I kept coming back to the fact that I would move when I stopped learning, and that I didn't really start reading books until I was sort of in my mid-20s, and I really enjoy. I didn't realize I enjoyed learning like that until that stage in my life. And then whilst I was going through this process, okay, well, I like learning. So what is it? What is that? My why? And then there was a quote that so I worked in England for England Futsal for 4 years, and there was a quote that the head coach used to say all the time to the players. He would just always say to them in these sessions, better never ends. Come on, keep striving for more. Better never ends. And every time I would hear him say it, I'd be like, oh, I love that. I love that message. I love the way that makes me feel, that how motivated that gets me. So then I stole it from him. So I took it. Then that was my why. So I have since credited him and told him of that, and he likes it. So he's fine with it.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, the Simon Sinek stuff, I think that exercise is really good. It's hard. It's not easy, is it? It's not easy to actually think, is that what it is? Is that the how, the what, all of those things? But yeah, because we've been going for 10 years, nearly 11 now, actually. And even then, it's like, I can't get my head around what it is. And like trying to do it as a team and things. I thought it was a really, really interesting exercise. And it does really help resonate with not only the internal team, but with people that you're speaking to as well. What's called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek.
I have. It's on my reading list, but I haven't read it yet.
I think that's great, and that really, just from what you've said, that's exactly what it is. It's like a lot of people say, all right, well, where do you want your business to go? What you need to have a goal for 5 years, 10 years, what turnover do you want? And it's I agree. And
I've got a journey. I know my journey, which is based on my why. I know that I want to strive for better in the things that seem to be working, but I don't know where my business is going to be. I don't even know if it will be a business. You know, I don't mind. I'm not worried that I don't have a destination. I'm quite comfortable with the journey, because I understand that sometimes if you do then arrive at your destination, that what's next, you can sometimes get this feeling of deflation once you arrive there and realize that you've got what you wanted and it doesn't quite live up to the expectation, perhaps. So yeah, there's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, no, I like that. Are there any other books that you've really resonated with you?
Yeah, like there's quite a few that have worked out for me. I guess Black Box Thinking was definitely a good one by Matthew Syed. That was really good. Another one he did was called Bounce, which was really good. What's his name? Anything by Malcolm Gladwell is normally pretty good as well. I really like his style of writing.
He did the 10,000 hours, wasn't it? That was Malcolm Gladwell.
He was Outliers. Yeah, he popularized the concept and has since. So there is some nuance to it as well, actually, and it's important that you kind of read a bit more around it, because there's some skill sets where it doesn't quite work, but I won't necessarily go too much into that. But he is quite nobly raised a counter argument against his own argument based off kind of his own learning throughout the last few years. So yeah, there's some really interesting stuff that where it is supported, and there's some other parts where it doesn't quite match up. So yeah, it's but lots of stuff out there. So many interesting books. I quite like the Talent Code as well, and the Culture Code by the same author. I think that was Brendan Coyle, I think his name was. They're really good. What's
the gist? I've not heard of those ones. What's the gist of that?
So the Culture Code is around optimizing culture within teams. The Talent Code is then more to do with is there a code for talent, and how do people become talented? You know, are you born with it or do you learn it? And that's the general message there. I won't spoil it, but it's a really interesting. That was one I think as a physio I took a lot. As a rehab physio, I really took a lot from that. How do I get people to learn movements and learn skills? There was loads of stuff from that book that I took.
Right. Yeah. No. You're right though. I love all this area, but I've got about 100 books that I've been doing this thing called Blinkist. Have you heard of it? Where you get the abbreviated. It's about 15 to 20 minutes of the book. So for like some people hate that concept because it feels like you're absolutely gutting these things. But I'm a short snappy
sharp.
person.
Yeah,
Just
get
like,
it
yeah,
done.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's really fascinating. And if you can take one or two things from this stuff, it's good. It's really find it very stimulating.
Yeah. Yeah, I use Goodreads. So Goodreads is it's like a review platform for books. So you can check the ratings and rate your own books, set up reading lists. So that's the one I've got. I think I've got something like 150 on my reading list, which is a completely insurmountable amount of books to read. But it helps me if I get to the end of a book and I'm not quite sure what's next, I'll kind of look on that list and go, all right, yeah, maybe that one. And yeah, that's been really great, actually.
Yeah, no, it's good. No, well, look, Charlie, I really appreciate your time today. It's been great giving me a couple of book ideas there as well. So I appreciate that. So thank you very much for your time. Very best of luck with the business. It sounds great. Really, your passion and drive and enthusiasm for the whole industry as well as your business comes across. So I'm sure it's going to do really well. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on. It's been an honour.
Always good to see another IPRS person come through as well.
Yeah, there's loads of us out there.
Great. Thanks, Charlie.
Cheers.